Yeah, we're live. It is 6:54, so I'm 6 minutes early. Got to get going a little early because I've got to get off before 8 o'clock. Got some stuff I got to get done. But tonight we're going to be talking about two things. One, the video that I just posted up today on the exhaust testing. So we compared the factory exhaust manifolds on an LS. This was a 6-liter LY6 to long tube headers. And the cool thing is I did the testing both with the stock cam and compared the stock manifold to the headers, and then with a stage 3 Brian Twilly Racing truck cam, and compared the stock exhaust manifolds to the long tube headers. And then I also tossed in, just because that's the kind of guy I am, tossed in a header test that I ran on a supercharged B15 crate motor from GM Performance Parts with a cam and the Whipple supercharger on to show you that, hey, maybe there is a time when we use 1 7/8 headers versus running 1 3/4 headers, because in that particular application at the 750 horsepower level, they were definitely worth some power. The test that I haven't run yet, mostly because I haven't seen any, is I would like to, excuse me, I'd like to run some smaller headers. I'd like to run some 1 5/8 headers on either a 4/8 or a 5/3, and then 1 3/4 and also 1 7/8. I've run a bunch of different design headers in various applications, and we've run 1 3/4 and 1 5 or 1 7/8 headers. And surprisingly enough, the interesting thing is down low, a lot of times the bigger header makes a little more power. And then it loses out to the 1 3/4 normally, and then at the top it might pick up a little bit, usually depending on what size the motor is and how wild the camshaft is. The interesting thing is when you look at the comparison between the stock exhaust manifolds and the headers on the NA motor on the 6-liter, you'll see that when we went up in camshaft, that indeed the headers gained more power once we had the camshaft in place. And this was just it was a stage 3, but still a fairly mild truck cam. And there's two reasons for that. One is that simply because the motor was making more power, which is kind of what we saw on the blower test, but also because the cam timing determines when these reflected waves and the scavenging effect from the header will take place and how effective it is. There's something to the camshaft as well. So on different cams, you might find that, not a dramatic change probably, but you will find that the headers make more or less power, and now people are going to be talking about header cams, which will be interesting. But that was a good test, and I like showing, because doing a back-to-back test for the stock exhaust manifold versus headers is one thing, is people think, oh yeah, the headers flow more, but they don't actually flow more, or they may not flow more. It's that these waves are going in and helping pull the exhaust out, which in turn helps pull the intake out. That's why we see it. It's called the scavenging effect, and that's why we see it. And that's why we see big gains down at 3,000 or 3,500 RPM. It's not because of like all the additional flow, because as we've seen in throttle bodies and other things where flow is the big thing, usually the gains are less down low, but this is not what's happening. It's like a long runner intake, only in reverse on the hot side, on the exhaust side. So that's what's going on. And then I think more than likely on the long tube headers, the 1 7/8 versus the 1 3/4 on the supercharged combination, we may well be getting into a flow issue there, where we're having the same size exhaust effectively trying to flow 750 or more horsepower worth of air, worth of exhaust. And so we get into an issue. But that begs the question, if that's the case, if it's just a flow issue, why does it work so well when we have small exhaust systems on super or turbocharged combinations where we're flowing all of that 750 horsepower, let's say, worth of exhaust through what might be a fairly small turbo, like a GT45, for instance, or even something a little bigger for the 750 horsepower level, because that don't work very well on a 6-liter. But even a 78, 75, if you look at what the flow orifice is on the turbo, you'll start to think, hey, that should be fairly restrictive. But it seems to work very well, like I said. Good stuff. But the other thing that we're going to talk about tonight, and I got to get my list ready here. Here we go. Is the 2.2 liter turbo Dodge motor, and I also have a 2.5 turbo Dodge motor in the Omni GLH, in the 85 GLH, which on my next trip, be very shortly, to West Tech, going to take that thing out, take it apart, and find out what's wrong with it, and then fix that. But right now, we're hoping, fingers crossed, that we have, if you guys haven't seen it, I did a video of the startup of the 1984 2.2 liter turbo motor that we pulled, which is the first year of the turbo combination that we pulled from the Dodge 600 from the wrecking yard. And that particular motor had a burned wiring harness. So I was hoping that that was the reason that that thing was in there. When we saw that the car was in good shape, I was a little worried. I thought, you know, maybe the trans went out, which is also what we're hoping, because I never get the transmission. We're hoping that the motor didn't go bad. But when I saw the engine fire, I thought, okay, good. Not that we want that to happen to somebody, but that would be more likely that the reason that it would come in and you know, somebody would junk that car because they had a wiring harness fire. And trying to solve that sort of situation, unless you're a harness guy and you take the whole thing out and put a new one in. But then again, it's probably not, that car is probably not worth all of that to some people. So that might be a good reason that it was there. And that's what I was hoping for. And so we were able to get the thing with Ish's help, again, thanks Ish from West Tech, to get that thing running, not just on, we got it running first on brake cleaner, and then we were able to start it up. I put injectors in it. We just put 24 pounders then again, it got rid of the stock ones that might have been burnt up, but either way, we're going to replace them anyway, because we want to put something big enough in there that we can then, you know, go up in stages on boost and stuff. And so we were able to get that thing running, and it did run, and it had oil pressure. You know, I'm still obviously a little skeptical. I did buy some new things for it. I've got a new timing belt, which it needs, and it looks like the gears on the cam need to be cleaned. They look like that they have some rubber deposits on it, which makes me think that at some point this belt probably slipped. I think it's in the right spot now. It seems to be, at least according to the timing marks and the way that the motor ran and idled. It seemed to idle fairly well. So I'm thinking it's in the right spot. But we're going to replace that. We're going to replace, you know, new plugs in it and that kind of stuff, and hopefully get it running. And then I may even, before we put that one on there, take it apart and just, you know, check the oil pump and check the bearings and maybe put a new head gasket on it, and, you know, check the pistons. And why, if I'm going to take that far apart, I'm going to do ring gap as well, because we know that we're going to go up and boost and run it, and then maybe put head studs in it and that kind of stuff. So all of that is up in the air until we get it on there and run. I really would like to just run it the way that it is and hope that it works. But if I'm going to do lots of testing and I'm going to go to the trouble of putting it on the dyno, the other thing that has to happen before I put it on the dyno is I've got to, right now it's connected to the bell housing so that we could start it. And that's mounted on the engine stand. And I've got to separate those, take the bell housing to Mahovitz, and take him a stock Chevy bell housing. So he'll just make an adapter plate to bolt the adapter plate to the 2.2 bell housing and then to the dyno. And that should all work out. He's really good at that, so that should not be a problem at all. So that way we can mount that thing up and get it running on the engine dyno, which would be cool. So, and once we do that, and so we have a couple of obstacles that we need to overcome. My plan is, obviously, first off, we're going to run it stock. So here are I have basically 10 videos planned for it. You know, things go well, and these are the things that I want to test on the 2.2 liter. So after I'm done with my discussion here, I want you guys to chime in and let me know other tests that you might want to see. But don't chime in yet, because I may well cover what you're going to talk about, because the list is fairly extensive. So the first thing I want to do, obviously, is I'm actually going to run this motor NA. So I have, and whoever sent me the NA intake manifold and exhaust manifold, thank you very much. I'm going to run it NA. So I've got the NA intake manifold, which will come into play later on, because I'm also going to run that under boost, because in my opinion, it should be a fairly good intake manifold actually under boost. So I've already done some design work on putting a different throttle body on it, because naturally we're not going to run the throttle body injection on it. We're just going to run the intake with port injection on it. And now that I say that, how exactly am I going to do that? Because I'm going to have to put port injectors in it. So again, another hurdle, and that's why we have these conversations. But that's what I want to do, and I'd like to run that one with port injection and then run it under boost. But I'd like to run it NA, and I could even put a carburetor on it. I guess we could get the stock throttle body running too if I wanted to run it, but I'd like to run it NA just so that we know what the starting point is. Because once we run it under boost, which I will do, and we'll run it all stock, because I have all of the stock stuff for the 84 turbo motor, which by the way is the one that where the turbo was not controlled by the ECU. So it was just wastegate controlled. It was just set at 7 pounds. It didn't have the overboost, or it didn't have any of those features in it yet. So it's just your bare bones 142 horsepower motor. So I want to run that after we run it NA. That way I can tell whether or not the turbo combination is doing what the turbo combination is supposed to do based on the NA power output. So if once I have the NA power output, I can go, okay, it is following the formula at 7 pounds or 7.5 pounds. It's doing 50% better of what the NA thing did. So that's kind of why I'd like to run it NA. So that would be the first thing, run it NA. Then run the stock turbo, and since this is an 84, it's still the draw through. So it has a throttle body mounted in front of the turbo. This still has the factory turbo. It is non-intercooled. It has the ugly, probably least effective intake manifold on it. It's just a big log, basically, that the turbo blows right into. So the throttle body opens, that air goes into the turbo after the throttle body, and then the turbo blows into the intake manifold, and then it has port ejectors in there. So we'll run it stock at the stock boost level, hopefully. And somebody sent me over the stock timing levels for that factory computer, and so I can run it with NA, then stock turbocharge with all of the stock stuff. I think that I got a factory air box, so I can connect the factory air box. But honestly, after looking at the size of the throttle body and the inlet size of the turbo, the stock airbox and throttle body and elbow that goes over the stock throttle body is probably not going to be restrictive. The opening of the throttle body is about this big. One of the common upgrades is to put the V6 throttle body on there so you can improve the airflow. Because of the way that I'm running it on the engine dyno, I can run almost whatever throttle body I want on there. All I have to do is upsize the turbo with a, for instance, a 2-inch or 1 3/4, however big the silicone coupler is, because it has a silicone coupler connecting the throttle body to the turbo, and then another coupler connecting the turbo, the discharge of the turbo, into the manifold. So I can essentially put however big a throttle body I want on there. But what we'll find out, especially at lower boost levels, is that the inlet size of the turbo is going to ultimately dictate how much airflow that the turbo will process, and the throttle body will become insignificant after we get up to a certain size. I think that there's going to be power to be had from the stock throttle body going up from that, because it seems fairly small. But after a point, we're not going to be able to do it. But in the first test, in the first video, I want to run it NA. I want to run the stock turbo at the stock timing and boost level. And then I want to, what I'll do is I'll go through a sequence. We'll run it at, like, 10 to 1 and 10.5 to 1, 11 to 1, 11.5 to 1, even getting up near 11.8 or 11.9 to 1, because at 7 psi, it's not going to hurt itself. And then we'll run it that way at the stock boost level, and then we'll also run it at the different air fuels, and then we'll also run it at the different timing levels. So we'll start out at 10 degrees and 15 and 20 and 22 or 23 or whatever we decide is the maximum amount. So that's what we'll do. That's what the first video will be. The introduction to the motor and NA and turbo, and then tune at the different levels to show you what happens at these different levels, so that guys, if they're tuning their things, they can see what happens. So test number 2 will be, obviously, since it's a turbo motor, we'll demonstrate what boost does, because that's one of the funnest things. So we'll run it at 7 pounds and 8, 9, 10, all the way up to, I'm thinking 15 or 16 pounds, probably non-intercooled. And we're going to run it on good gas, because if I'm going to turn the boost up on a non-intercooled motor, we're going to want to run good gas in it, because I want to be able to run enough timing in it to where it makes power. We'll also run, and then while we're doing that, I will monitor the inlet air temps at the different boost levels to demonstrate what it does and what it doesn't do. Hugh, thank you for the forged pistons and ring lands. I actually have forged pistons for the 2.5 already, but I'm going to run all of this initial testing with the stock pistons and just ring gap. So in part 2, we'll run the different boost levels on race gas. I will also run water meth injection, and we'll show what that does to the charge temperatures, because I've got a water meth kit from the guys at Snow. So I've got the boost juice stuff, and we can run water meth and show what that does. And then I will run different throttle body sizes. So we'll run the stock throttle body. I'll probably run one of the V6 throttle bodies, just because they'll be easy to put on. And I can put a 105 millimeter LS throttle body on there just because it would be funny and look cool for YouTube. But again, we'll show you that it doesn't do anything after a given size, because if it's this big and you neck it down to this big, it's going to be wherever the neck down point is. But that will be interesting to show the different throttle body sizes and what it does. And also the different throttle body sizes at different boost levels, because the throttle body size, the stock throttle body size, may do nothing. It may be more than enough for 7 pounds for the power output of the motor at 7 pounds. At 15 pounds or 16 pounds or whatever, non-intercooled, we might see a point where, hey, look, it's starting to need more airflow, and so therefore more throttle body. So that's test 2. Test 3, it seems like we're doing a lot already. Yeah. Test 3 is going to be pump gas and race gas mix, because we want to run enough boost where this comes into play, versus E85. And again, at different boost levels. So we're going to run 15 or more pounds, and we'll show how much E85 is worth, because it's always worth power, and even more so on a combination that's running higher boost, that has higher charge temperatures, where it can add more cooling and do all that good stuff. Then we're going to do, in that same video, in that same test series, we're going to do different size downpipes. So right now I have I think I have a 2.5. So we can also run a 3-inch and a 2-inch, and then I can also run a muffler or different style mufflers and run an exhaust off of this thing to show what effect the exhaust has on boost response and power output. I also want to do a stock exhaust manifold versus some kind of header. And since I don't have a header for it, although we have a better exhaust manifold on the 2.5 that I might be able to use, the problem is it's going to require reconfiguring the turbo and all that stuff. But what I probably will do is put the exhaust manifold from the NA motor on there and configure a new turbo position for that, and show what a different exhaust does compared to the kind of log style manifold, just to see if there's a difference. So that will be a lot of exhaust testing plus the pump gas race gas deal. So we'll find out what effect those things have on power. Test number 4 is going to introduce intercoolers. So I have a factory Turbo 2 intercooler, and I have a bigger air-to-air intercooler, and I have a variety of different air-to-water intercoolers. So we can run a bunch of different intercooler tests on this, obviously at different boost levels, and show, hey, look, the intercooler changed the charge temperature by blah, 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 whatever the number is, 100 degrees, 110, 115 degrees. And so that allowed us to go up and boost and make more power. We can also do, we're going to do air-to-air, and we're going to do air-to-water, and I'm also going to do ice water in the air-to-water, because why not? To show you what it does. And then we'll also introduce the stock T2 stuff there, because like I said, I have that intercooler. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the stock T2 intercooler. So I'm going to position the throttle body and the turbo so that I can come off of the stock T2 and then just go into the factory log manifold that's on the T1. And we just have to reconfigure the turbo and clock it so that we can get a discharge going out of the turbo into the air-to-air intercooler. And it doesn't even have to be positioned in its normal spot. It's going to be on the engine dyno. So as long as we can get the air to go through that small air-to-air intercooler and then run a fan through it and show what it does, and then have it go back into the inlet of the factory T1 intake manifold, then we can show what it does and how much power it makes and what kind of cooling it has relative to other coolers that we know are going to be oversized and offer an awful lot more than that one does. So we'll run that at different boost levels. So the intercooling versus non-intercooling, and then ice water and all that stuff will be test 4. So test 5 will be an intake manifold shootout. So one of the things on these turbo motors is that they're essentially, I'm calling it 4 different intake styles. Most of the turbo guys just use 3 of them. So we have the log style manifold, which I have on the 84. And then we have a 1-piece and a 2-piece, and I happen to have both of those. I have one of them that's on the 2.5, and also the gentleman that I bought the car from loaned me another one to test. So I have all 3 of those. And then I also have the naturally aspirated intake manifold, which now I just figured out I've got to put port injection in. So that's not insurmountable, but it's going to take a little bit more work. So I'd like to run all of those, you know, obviously all of them at the same boost level with a good intercooler. And so we have to take the the T1 manifold and turbo, and then route that through an intercooler to go into that, and then the other ones will be a little bit easier to do. And so we can do an intake shootout because guys have wanted to know, hey, what's better, the one piece or the two piece, and how much different is the log style manifold compared to the others. I think what we're going to see is the same thing that we normally see, and that's that, hey, runner length makes a difference. So this log style manifold that has essentially no runner length in it is going to be the least powerful in the given RPM range than the other two that definitely have runner length in them. And then I'm curious to see, like I said, about the NA one, which also has runner length, to see how that one fares compared to the other turbo style manifolds. So that will be test 5. That will be the intake shootout. Test 6 we'll introduce cams. So we'll have a cam and spring upgrade on it, and then also an adjustable sprocket. So I can put an adjustable sprocket on there and adjust the timing, advanced, and retarded, and show what the Admiral, what's up? Drop your email. Yes, Admiral. There's my email if you have questions. So cam and sprocket. So we'll do adjustable sprocket. We'll advance and retard the cam. And what we'll see is that if we advance the cam, it picks up power at the top, and retard the cam, it picks up power down low. I'm lucky in that this early 84 car has, I think, the best of the non-roller cams. At least it has the most duration and stuff for the factory ones. And then we'll put aftermarket cams in them and try those. I don't know which aftermarket cams we're going to put in there yet. I'm going to talk to the guys at Comp about getting some. And, you know, if we have to have some made, we can do that. That's not a problem. And then do at least one kind of cam upgrade, because I know that these motors are going to respond to cams. They have to. There's no way that they don't. And I want to show exactly what they do. And then also having the adjustable cam sprocket on there hopefully will allow us to kind of dial it in and find out what's going on. And obviously that will come after we've tested the intake manifolds and decided what intake manifold we'd like to choose for that kind of cam test. The test number 7 we'll introduce head porting. So I have a head being done by David Vizard, and I think another gentleman is sending me another ported head, which I can try. And so head porting we'll introduce and find out. And actually, I would kind of like to test that also NA. I'd like to find out, after we do the cam, I'd like to find out how much the ported head is worth NA with a camshaft, and then introduce the boost part of it to it and go, okay, look, at 15 pounds, it did this much. And then then hopefully we'll be starting to make some, you know, with a ported head and a cam, and we're still going to have the turbo that's on there right now. Fingers crossed that thing is still in good shape and will cooperate for all this testing. If not, I have replacements, and we'll get into turbo upgrades, which is going to be the next thing. And hopefully we'll have enough turbo to be able to test these things and not run out of turbo before we run out of cylinder head and camshaft. So that's test number 7. Test number 8 will introduce turbo upgrade. So I have what I'll do is I will either have an exhaust manifold made for it. I can also use the one that's on the 2.5. Obviously I can use the one that's on the 2.2. The thing is, it's kind of limiting in what kind of turbos that we can put on it. We have to put on turbos that have housings that are, or flanges that are specific for that 2.2 liter. And while I want to do that, I also want to test other stuff, because I'm on the engine dyno and not limited by what fits down in where the engine is. And what I want to show is when we do a bigger turbo, what happens, how much do we lose response, and how much do we gain, and what happens, if anything, to the charge temperature at the same boost level. So I have some max speeding turbos. I have the GT30 76 and 2 of those, I think, and the GT35 82s, which I think are going to be on the big side for this. And I think I also have some other smaller ones. I might have an actual Garrett GT22, which might work. It might be a little on the small side. But I have a GT45 and an S475, and we could get really nuts and put something on there that we know is going to be super laggy and might not ever even spool up. That will bring up test number 9, where we add nitrous to it. So I'm going to run nitrous on this thing, and I don't know. I might combine nitrous obviously with a lower boost and just more as a gee whiz kind of thing. But I think I don't see a lot of that, and maybe guys that are drag racing them with bigger turbos are doing that and using a 50 shot or something to help get this thing spooled up. But it'll be interesting to see what the, as always, what the effect of the nitrous is and gets the turbo spooled up and all that works out good. So, and then the test number 10 would just be, okay, now that we have a combination that has ring gap and has head studs and MLS gaskets on it and a ported head and some kind of camshaft and hopefully the right intake and a good sized turbo that we'll know will make power. So now let's turn it up and let's just kind of see what happens. Let's see if we can get, let's see if we can get a fairly decent number out of the stock block and crank and cam and because this is the 84 is going to be the 6-bolt crank. I think it's not a forged crank, so it's going to be a cast crank. I'm not really worried about the crank. Probably the piston or the rod is definitely going to break first. So we'll kind of see what happens and run this thing up. I think that the 2.5 is a common block, and so it would be stronger ultimately, and it would have a lot more torque. The thing that I want to do that's not on this list is when I get the 2.5 back together, I would like to run it with a stock cam and a stock head that will have the 781 head on it. It won't have a G head on it. It'll be the later head. But I'd like to run that in stock trim also because I'd like to compare the boost and the power curves of the 2.2 versus the 2.5 with common things on them. So that with the same turbo and the same exhaust and the same intake manifold, the same intercooler and that kind of stuff, I know that one is going to be a roller cam and one's going to be a flat tapping cam. But I just want to see kind of more or less what the change in displacement does for the boost response. Because as we got later and later in reading the history of these motors, as we get later and later, they started enhancing torque production on the 2.5, which makes me wonder. So if there's any 2.2 or 2.5 turbo experts out there, it makes me wonder, and I wonder the same thing about the Dodge 360 in the little red Express versus a 346 pack, because I honestly think that 360 being bigger could give that 346 pack a run for its money if we ran them both on the dyno, because I think it's going to make so much more torque that I would like to see the comparison. And the same thing with a 2.5 T1 motor, with the torque that it makes compared to a 2.2, even a T2 motor with an intercooler and stuff on it, I think that because the later 2.5s, I think offered over 200 foot-pounds of torque. So I'd like to see one of those. I'd like to see the curves in comparison between those two. And I know we know one is going to make more peak power because it's rated at more peak power, but I'd like to see the low speed part of that curve and see where the T2 eventually starts taking over. And I've been kind of scouring the interwebs here for actual dyno data, for some dyno printouts of stock stuff, and I haven't been able to find anything. I'd like to see some dynojet numbers or any kind of chassis dyno number, because that's probably what we'll see. I doubt we'll see engine dyno numbers. I'd like to see some chassis dyno numbers of the stock motors, or even mildly modified. If you guys has an exhaust on there, or always turn the boost up to 10 pounds or whatever they're doing, I'd like to see what they do and what the curves look like. But we may have to wait till I do it, because when I did a search for 2.2 turbo stuff, lots of my videos came up and I haven't even run them yet, other than start them up and talk about them in the car with a broken motor and that kind of stuff. So there needs to be more information out there, and there needs to be more dyno information. And hopefully with all this testing, I can provide that. So and when I get the 2.5 running, I'll try to do some stuff on the engine dyno with it also, and not quite this extensive, because I don't think we'll need to, but we'll do some testing with that, maybe stock and then in modified trim and stuff, and run the boost up. But we want to get that thing or one of them back in the car so that I can drive the car around and do some chassis dyno testing also to find out what's going on. So let me know what you guys think about the other testing that you think we might need to get done on this 2.2. And I think that the camshafts have arrived for the 3800 and the valve springs, I think. So hopefully I'll be able to do some of that testing. A 2.2 with a 6-liter Power Stroke VGT turbo. Porsche welded the heads on. They did for their Le Mans cars, which is just like all kinds of different awesome. Great Depression Racing. Aaron from Hefner Performance, who built Lee's Turbo Vipers, had an 8-valve charger, built a tubular manifold with scraps and excessively large primaries, and made 400 wheel horsepower on pump gas. That seems like an awful lot for pump gas, because I know what 400 wheel horsepower would take with whatever kind of tubular manifold you want to put on there. I mean, most of the stuff I've seen is like 22, 23 pounds for getting near 300 wheel horsepower. So 400 wheel horsepower on pump gas seems like a lot to me. Oh, Adam, that's a good point. Are you going to run aftermarket DFI control? We're going to run this with the, we started it up with the Holley HP management system. So yeah, we have complete control over, we have a TC1 electronic boost controller if we want to use that. We have a manual controller if we want to use that. We have the, the factory wastegate, which that's just going to be limited by whatever the boost reference is. But we're going to control that, and we have full control over timing and full control over air fuel, and we're going to put big injectors in it so we can do all of that stuff. Because when we run E85, when we run high boost stuff, we're going to have a lot of injector in it, and it'll be smarter just to put that in to begin with. I can change the 2.5 head gasket in 45 minutes. Nice. You need to come over then. Chris from Turbos Unleashed. Brandon, I think that Chris is I think that's what manifold is on the 2.5. But I don't know if it's flanged for the T3. I think I haven't looked up in there, but I think his is flanged for the standard style Dodge Turbo. Long Island's in the house. Boosted Drummer, you're supposed to have a few Turbo Dodge guys in the chat. Where are they at, man? The torque enhancement for the high torque later 2.5s are just from boost control. I think they allow 10, 11 pounds as soon as possible, or 2.5s were like 7. Yeah, all of the later ones after 85 had overboost features, so that they would do it for a period of time. So for 10 seconds, they would allow, like, instead of 7.5 pounds, they would allow on the non-intercooled stuff, they would allow like 9 pounds, and then on the intercooled stuff, they would go from 9 to 11 pounds, but only for 10 seconds. And then you had to drive out of boost for another 10 seconds before they would give you back that 10 seconds or any portion thereof, which is really kind of a cool idea to have a timer in there. And the question I have, which I don't know the answer to, and maybe some of the expert 2.2 turbo guys will know, when they rated these motors, the power outputs, like the 84 is rated at 180, 142, and then the later ones are like at 146, and the T2 ones were 175. But when they rated those, was that on the overboost feature, or was it on the standard boost? So somebody, if they know, let me know. Daniel, normally the NA cams are better, and I think that probably the Shelby upgrade cam would be better still, I would think. Definitely get a hold of a BMF intake to test. Can we bolt a Pro Charger onto it? Yeah, but why would we want to? Yeah, I'm not worried about the crank, actually. Brandon, because the 4-valve heads just basically bolt on. I think there's going to probably be more to it than that. The closer you get to 200 horsepower NA on the 2.2, the better. That would be really nice. Like 100 horsepower per liter would be awesome NA, except that that's really hard to do. Any plans to do an air-to-air versus air-to-water intercooler to see the damage heat soak does after a few runs? Heat soaking, which one of those do you think is going to heat soak? Both of them? I think your power will be in the exhaust manifold and turbo matchup. Okay. Fast burn head versus bathtub head. So Dan, you want to see a stock head to stock head kind of comparison? Isn't that also going to change the static compression? I think it is. Oh, Brandon, we can drill out the stock exhaust manifold for a T3. That would make life easy. I was going to do an adapter from the Dodge pattern. We were just going to draw one out and have it cut out, have it water jetted, and then just do a short section of tubing to go to a T3 flange. And then spacing it out would also give us a little bit more room to be able to make the turn to get the intercooler and tubing to go into the factory log manifold that we have on the 84. And I thought it would kill two birds with one stone. Nicholas, a mostly stock 88 T2 motor made 182 horsepower and 205 torque, 14 to 15 pounds. Excuse me. Raised boost up to 28 pounds and it only went up to 238. Seems like it should be more than that. Dan, what's up? How about Typhoons? The guys at West Tech had one of those around for a while, but I don't know what happened to it. Dan, the 2.2 is going to run on the engine dyno. The 2.5 is in the car and it's going to come out, but then something is going to go back in the car. Low performance at MLS gaskets. Does Felpro make MLS gaskets for the 2.2 and the 2.5? And are they the same gasket? Richard, you don't do very much SVO turbo. I did a bunch of it back in the day with Dave from Tiny Avenger, but no videos of it. I did a couple of magazine articles with him on some stuff on his car, on the little Tiny Avenger car. I don't want a Daytona. I like the GLHs though. Terry, I don't know what the stock. They use a number of different stock turbos on these 2.2s and 2.5s. Maybe some of these guys could give you some dimensions on it. Ooh, white LX. I like the XR4 TIs. Front wheel drive performance and turbos unleashed. I think that turbos unleashed is the stuff that's on the 2.5. I think that he did that, but I don't know if I don't know what cam is in it. Compression's overrated. Well, these have low compression. Try out RGL10 cam phaser. Somebody's sending me a cam, an adjustable cam sprocket for it. Nicholas, 142, 164, 12, 13 pounds, boost auto. Okay, cool. Hey, Rich, I saw you're wanting to try a Super Coupe intercooler. I wasn't really wanting to try one of those. I just saw two of them at the wrecking yard the last time I was there, and I was going to grab them just because I more so wanted the tube that says intercooler on it because I think that that's cool. And the stock intercoolers we used to get all the time just because it was cool to have an intercooler. I don't think that they're really big enough for most things, but The Lima turbo is fun to mess with. We did a lot of stuff with those turbos back in the day. I mostly would take the T3s from the SVOs and from the T-Birds and stuff and put them on Hondas, and that little T3 actually worked pretty well on a B16. Brandon, look into the head swap. I just think that a 4-valve head swap will be really, really low on the list. If I want a 4-valve deal, I probably would swap in a K series. Yeah, I don't, in looking at the design of that stock 84 log style manifold, the T1, it can't be very good. It's got to be terrible. It's got to lose a bunch of torque compared to these long runner manifolds. I'm hoping that they're all long enough. And if I have to, if these are not long enough for the, I mean, these things make peak power at like 5,000 RPM. If that's the case, they need long runners in them. Skip Barber Dodge 2-liter for the farm of 2000 was only 150 horsepower. Yeah, the 2.5s weren't forged, just the 2.2s were, right? Great Depression Racing. I know, but the exhaust design, like a tubular header, even the nicest one in the world, is not going to overcome the fact that it has a nothing cylinder head on it and a bad camshaft and a bad intake manifold and all these other things that are going to stop it from making power. So even the best turbo in the world and the most cool double throwdown stainless wazoo exhaust, it's still blowing through something that just doesn't want to make power. And especially when you limit it to pump gas, unless that pump gas is pump E85 or pump C16, it's hard to get the level of boost that you need to get it to make essentially 500 flywheel horsepower, because that's what 400 wheel horsepower would be. And again, I'm not saying he didn't do it. I'm just saying that seems like a lot for, you know, because you throw out a 400 wheel horsepower number, which I've seen a few of those. I've seen 500 stuff, but it's always at like 40 pounds of boost or something. Will you be able to display and compare David Visor's port work? We'll show a before and after of what the stock head was, because he's going to have all of that data, and we're going to do videos on it. So he'll have all of the data on what it was when it was stock and then what it was when it was all done. $142, $164 was an 84 T1 Dodge 600 automatic. That's what this thing came out of. That's exactly the car that it came out of. It was an automatic. It was a 600. It's a T1. This thing has a Felpro head gasket on it right now, but it's not an MLS, I don't think. We want shiny exhaust. Random. Let's see. Almost forgot. Thank you very much. This 2.5 motor, I'm not sure about it. It's I have Wiseco forged pistons for it, so then it could be a built motor after I take it apart and put it back together. Although the Wiseco pistons I have are standard bore, so I got to make sure that this thing cleans up. So boosted drummer, there were only two aftermarket intakes, the BMF and the Lone Wolf intake. Are those still readily available, or are still people still using those, or have they gone by the wayside, like the aluminum 3800 Series 3 heads? Can you mix 90 and 100 octane fuel and get 95? Yes, you can. Super Coupe intercooler on my turbo minivan. Very cool. Brian, you're good, man. You're all good. I just went through all 10 tests already. We're going to test everything, basically. Intake manifold tests and exhaust manifold tests and cylinder heads and pump gas and race gas and E85 and different boost levels and effective timing and effective air fuel and cams and cam sprockets and turbos and nitrous and oh my. Yeah, David knows what he's doing. He knows an awful lot more about porting heads than I ever will. So our farm argued for months about headers for a reason. Well, every race car, every turbo race car has headers. I mean, it has a designed header on it. But the thing is that if you, and I've run tests on the tubular exhaust manifolds versus some other cast exhaust manifolds, and at the power levels that I was running it at, I didn't see a big change. But I don't design IndyCar motors or Formula One motors, so I'm sure that they know what they're doing. Daryl, I've actually already run a test on kegger mods. We did one from the UT Awesome guys and tested it versus a stock one, and it did make more power. I haven't put a video up on it because it's for a test that we did for Engine Masters. Ever tried brewing up your own race gas? I have not. We did try the White Lightning. What word am I looking for? Not Everclear, moonshine. We did try the moonshine out with you guys from Brian Tooley and the Bardstown Bourbon Company. Kyle, that's essentially what I'm going to do. I'm just going to make two flanges and connect them with a piece of tubing. It's real easy. It's like the it's a lot like what we do on the LS, where we just ran our Y pipe into a merge that has a 3-inch V band, and then from that 3-inch V band we can mount adapters that I made that go from a V band to a T3 or a V band to a T4 or a V band to a T6, because we run all. I haven't run a T3 ever on a single turbo on an LS, even on a 4.8. But we have run T4s and T6s on those because the Summit Racing, that S475 is a T6. So that allows us to do that for different sizes. And that's what I was thinking of for this, is we would just water jet out a flange or even just cut it, because it doesn't have to be exact. I could even probably hole saw it, come to think of it. And we would just make a flange that bolts to the factory manifold, and then with a piece of tube welded to it, and then a T3 flange welded to the other side. It doesn't have to be very long. It just has to stick it out a little bit. And again, if it does, then we're able to put whatever T3 turbo we want on there. And then also I get the turbo away from the opening of the manifold. And then, because we're only going to run it non-intercooled with probably the factory turbo, I'm guessing. And then after that manifold's probably going to come off after we do our manifold test. 600 wheel horsepower 2JZ 366 would work. Daryl, there's so many different intake choices for a 400 horsepower 318. Why would you just not do an RPM air gap with a carburetor on there? You could do port injection. And the guys from Hughes did one, but they did it for the Magnum. Boosted, did you test that BMF manifold? Did it do anything? Turbo Chevy 4-cylinder. So like what the what's the one that they had in the Fiero? Would you consider putting the 2.2 on engine masters? I'm not in charge of that. I have nothing to do with engine masters other than they ask me occasionally to be on there when I need to fill in for somebody. I see drag imports run multiple wastegates directly on the exhaust housing. I was told it mimics a larger AR on a turbo. It should change the volume of the exhaust housing, but I've never tried it. I think you should only, I would only do that if it was required for fitment. Otherwise, in my opinion, the wastegate should be directional with the way that the exhaust is run. That's what most professional race teams do, and I think it's probably a good idea for having the best wastegate control. But it's interesting that I never thought about that it's going to that the opening in the gate might change the volume of the turbine housing a little bit. Factory speed, I think you skipped my question. What was your question? Did I miss it? I'm scrolling back factory speed and I don't see it. So please, if I don't see it, make sure that you ask it again. Can you copy and paste it? I try to get to all of them. Iron Duke, that's what I was trying to think of. Okay, factory, come on, hit me up with your question again. Torco VP, octane boosters. The problem with testing octane booster is that you're trying to find out if you can run more timing, and the way that you find out if you can't run more timing is that the motor breaks, and because we don't have knock sensors. Have you run any 8-stack injection stuff? Yeah, there's lots of videos up with 8-stack injection. I've run it on everything. I've run a small block. We've run it on a big block. We've run it on an LS, lots of different LSs. We've run like cross ram, side draft kind of things, down drafts on the rectangular port stuff, on the cathedral port stuff. Run it on Fords. I don't know if I've run it. I don't think I've run it. We have run it on a big block Ford, but it was an FE, and I didn't do it. Robert Pond did it when he was running one of his aluminum FE motors. When you say pump gas on LS at 11.5 to 1 compression, are you talking about 91? We normally run in California. We only have 91, so that's what we would run it on. And the factory stuff runs fine on 91, especially with factory electronics that have knock sensors on them. 11.5 to 1, you might start getting into a point where you'd want to look at softening the chamber, or if you have a good camshaft in that, that's going to have, you know, it's going to change the dynamic compression. But yeah, we would run 11.5 to 1 an LS on pump gas. A 13 to 1 LS build. Daryl, thank you very much. Did you have a question? '86 Turbo Z, CS awaits. The hot vapor engine is real. Oh, Dan has spoken. And yeah, and don't say anything bad about E3 spark plugs either. Yeah, the 91 is not ideal. The thing that helps us run it on the engine dyno with that kind of pump gas, with that kind of compression also, and you need to consider this, is because we're running with super cold air going into the motor. The water is in the motor is only 130 or 140 degrees. It's not, we don't normally run it at temperature. Again, just so that we have the extra safety margin for the things that we're doing on the dyno. It's not being tuned for the street because it all has to be retuned when it goes in a car anyways. The tune that you put on an engine dyno, at least the stuff that I'm doing for wide open throttle, is probably nowhere near what it's going to do when it goes out on the street. And when it goes out on the street, it's going to all of the drivability stuff would need to be tuned anyways. So with a carburetor, it might actually be a little closer, but even then, you know, you want to take away some of the power and add some of the safety, and it's going to make less when you have the temperature higher. Okay, Daryl, just want to make sure you got taken care of. The factory NA 2.2, 2.5, 4-1 exhaust manifold is not a bad piece. It looks like it's pretty good. Ford most of them used to chop off the donut flange and weld on the odd Dodge turbine flange. They claimed 25 horsepower way back when nobody tested it. If you saw the K24 turbo that I did with the guys from Skunk, we did some initial testing with cams and we didn't port the head yet, but we did cams and we did NA, a bunch of NA stuff, and we ran the 8500 and I ran a bunch of different turbos on it, and I ran that with the factory exhaust manifold that we just welded a flange onto and made that into the turbo manifold. They actually work very well, and that's exactly what I'm going to do on the 4200 that I've already done on the 4200. We've already welded a flange that we can use the stock exhaust manifold or the crazy long runner weird thing that I did, which didn't seem to help very much. But I think the factory manifold, being cast iron, I think is going to work very well. So how well do long tube headers work on a stock manifold versus a stock manifold on turbocharged application? I don't have an answer to that. I've only ever tried it one time that I can remember, and that was on the B series Honda, but I don't have a definitive answer for that. Factory speeds question is at 1946. I don't know. Okay, how much does a cam affect compression? It affects dynamic compression. It doesn't affect static compression at all. Going to run flat tops and valve release, the 235-ish 50 cam static is calculated 11.5 with a 40 thousandths gasket on a 408. Okay, that should be a good combination. There's nothing wrong with that. Boosted, I'll send you my dyno sheet from a 467 horsepower pull, your Facebook Messenger. If you have it, I'd rather see stuff that's lower than that. Does anybody have any like stock runs or anything close to stock or anything at 10 pounds? Like, and especially if I would like it to be, excuse me, on a manual trans and not on an automatic, ideally. But beggars can't be choosers, so I'll take whatever I can get. But I'd like to see lower power stuff. Because that's an extremely modified motor, and obviously one that's making really good power. It's pretty awesome. Factory speed, why a cam from Texas Speed with a lower exhaust lift, 238, 248, 655, 615. That's not uncommon for the exhaust lift to be lower. I would be a little concerned about the intake lift on that. A 238, 248 would obviously work, but the higher lift that you get, the more aggressive the ramp rate is. And so I just get leery of valve train instability and longevity of things like lifters and rockers and stuff. Can I replace the 5.7 with a 383 in my 95 Chevy with the TBI system? I don't think you'll be very happy with that, because the TBI system is the limiting factor in terms of power production. It's going to restrict a 383 even more. You might benefit from some more low-speed power, but the TBI system is kind of limiting, and you need to be able to tune it if you're going to do that. Nicholas, that's a good idea. I was going to look into the stock oiling system too, windage trays and stuff. Because when I take it apart to put ring gap in it, that's one of the things I wanted to look at. I'm hoping that it probably is. It's probably just a big open pan like most factory deals. Boosted, thanks. If you find some stuff, let me know. Sorry for all the NALA questions. It's no, Factory, you're here to ask questions, man, and that's what all of this is about. You can ask any question about any subject that it's got to be car related, because then I get people that talk about all sorts of weird stuff, and with questions that I can't answer, I don't want to answer. But if it's car related, then it's okay. Or submarines or bikes or whatever, it's all cool. Crank scrapers, the ones that I've run, and we did some with I think we did some on my Engine Masters motor. I know that we did different oil pans and stuff and windage trays, and that all works really well, obviously. Hope you got the Stan Weiss flow references for Mopar 2.2s and Pinot 2.3s. I posted the Clark rocket fuel listing for nitrous oxide, 1.47 thrust increase for nitrous and gasoline. I don't know what you're talking about, the Clark rocket fuel listing, but I go to Stan Weiss's stuff all the time to look at that's a good place for getting all sorts of like flow data. Good, Hollywood. Get out there, get it running. And I'm one to talk. I have a Nova that's been sitting forever out there. It does need a VTEC head. That would be awesome. Casey, I have some old UFO magazines you can look at. I go down the UFO rabbit hole. The Element 115, all of that stuff. I'm fascinated by that. I get together with my kids and we try to watch Bigfoot stuff occasionally to find out, this is a time they're really going to find one this time, and hope that they do, Loch Ness Monster, all of that stuff. It's all good stuff. Need an Olds 455. I just need to get the Buick 455 running, and when it does, it's going to run as a stage 1 455, which will be awesome. Have you done any testing on root supercharger rotor coatings? I haven't done a back-to-back on rotor coatings, but some of the blowers that I have run have had coated rotors. Would love to see the oil passage. That's another thing that should be done. But I don't know how we would do. I don't know that we would see power differences from that, but I'd like to try it though. So we'll put that down on the list. Oil passages. An oil pump. They're mostly covered and picks up oil pressure. I would think so. Are we talking about the fact that there's a mismatch between the outlet of the oil pump and the inlet going into the block or something? Because that's actually fairly common. Have you ever seen David Benjamin's 3-valve Hemi heads? He first machined them in 1980s on a Bridgeport for a steel core. He said he knew some of the people at Westec. I haven't seen that, but that would be cool. And I know that who did the 3-valve stuff? There's a big argument about who actually invented that, and I think that because Mercedes started using it and somebody sued them. It might have been Batten or Fueling or one of those guys. Have you ever tried E85 on a GLH? I've never run a GLH on the dyno, so I haven't tried that, but we are doing that. That is one of the tests that we're doing, obviously, because it's a, I meant United 510 Owners Magazine. But we will compare E85 to pump gas, race gas kind of thing. Stage 1 will be with a stage 1 cam, because I want to do a comparison between a stage 1 and another very famous era big block. So today's engine hate goes to the vapor engine. People, I don't know why people get triggered by things. It's like I don't feel that dispassionately about any of the motors. Some turbo Dodge guys upgrade to the whole set turbos. I've run a few whole set turbos back in the day, but they were bigger ones though than they were ones that the guys from HP Performance had with their kits. but I haven't taken them from the wrecking yards though. The ones that we got back in the day, like we would look at the we were like had a thing for the T3 turbos on the mostly T-Birds, because we didn't really find very many SVO Mustangs on them, but we found lots of T-Birds back in the day in the wrecking yards, and we would find Mercurs, the XR4 TIs, which I just love the way that those things looked. And if any motor needed a 4-valve head, it definitely was that one. Nicholas, I'm going to send you my email, so send me something so we can get in touch. Let's see. Very few stock dynos have been done. So I got about 2 more minutes. I got to get going. Let's see. Will you ever try Chevy 3.6? I want to do the LV3, I think, which is a 4.3 liter. Ian, I'm talking about the actual oil pickup. Tube screen is covered, trimming the metal. Oh, okay. So they have an opening. It's just not very big where it picks the oil up. That's not a good design. Very few stock dynos have been shared. So I need to make sure when I'm doing all this that we do it all for posterity. I'm a little afraid that the turbo is not good on this thing. When I started taking it apart and tried to spin it, it didn't spin very well. And I actually, sprayed a bunch of WD-40 and oil, put oil in there and spun it and worked it around. It seems like it's all moving freely now. I'm hoping that it's in good shape and that it works. Uh, 2.2, 2.5 guys are notoriously cheap to ever dyno. I think my buddy Steve down at Powertrain, he said that he had a dyno day with these 2.2 and 2.5 turbo guys, the Omnis and the Chargers and all of these, and because he occasionally will have dyno days where like clubs will come in and it'll be all of these guys and they'll all just make a day of it and get pizza and all that, and everyone's dynoing their cars, and obviously some guys trying to be the dyno king for the day, and that's all really cool stuff, because that's the car guy thing, and that's what it's all about. So you're at an HE35 whole set on a built 2.2. I actually have I think I have a 5-valve motor. Not a 2.2 though. David Benjamin did it first. Okay. Now, see, I was told that these turbos, the water-cooled turbos especially, that they lasted a long time on the 2.2s and the 2.5s. Yeah, Kyle, how high are guys spinning these motors when they put cams in them and short runner intakes and stuff? Are they getting them to make power at 7,000 or something? I don't have any plans for a 16-valve head on the 2.2. I say that, and then I'll go to the wrecking yard and see a PT Cruiser or something and think, God, I should really put that on there. But really, what I should do is just swap the whole motor in there to make life a lot easier. Mighty Mopar's in the house. Yes, that's all you need is nitrous to get rid of the lag. That's why. That's right. That's one of the last things. That's the big thing before the big, after the big turbo is we got to get the nitrous to help spool it. Yeah, we have lots of turbos I listed that we're going to try on the 2.2 and on the 2.5 already has a turbo upgrade on it. So it might be also that I take the turbo off the 2.5 because I think it's forward motion or something. I hope I didn't get that wrong. I talked to him on the phone too. I feel so bad. But that is an upgraded turbo, so I will have that to also put on the 2.2. Four-way LS3 heads, 1101 compression, trying to decide on a cam. I want to get as much cam as possible without a 3500 plus converter. So streetable race car. So you want all of the most power that you can get, but you also want it to be streetable. That's a tough combination. Take a look at the factory speed. Take a look at the LS3 intake video, or intake test videos that I did. Look at the carbureted versions to get an idea, because that was like a 416 with LS3 heads on it. And so take a look at those power curves and the cam and stuff that we use in that, and you'll get a fairly good idea on what you're looking at. Pick up some turbo 2.4s while you're finding all those. I see a lot of those turbo like PT Cruisers and stuff in the wrecking yard. Forward motion, that's Enforcer turbo. And I don't know which turbo it is, because he didn't know exactly which one it was, but I'm told that it is an upgrade, and so hopefully it would be more than the stock one. Two minutes left, 4 minutes ago. I know, right? Yeah, we won't try to run overspeed the stock turbo. There's no reason to do that. If we get up to a point where we're getting diminishing returns already, we should be able to see that on the dyno, that we can know that, hey, it's time for a bigger turbo. Because if we put an electronic wastegate controller on it and it won't hold 15 pounds or 20 pounds or whatever the number is, and it starts falling off, and we'll also be logging back pressure, which will be good information for you guys as well. We start logging back pressure and go, hey, look, the back pressure is ridiculous. It's time to change the turbo. We know that that's going to happen. Okay, guys, I got to get going. Thank you all for showing up on this turbo adventure. I really can't wait to get all this done, because this is a lot of like cool testing, and there's just so much data here. I'm looking at all this test. I'm getting really excited about it. I'm just hoping that everything cooperates. There's so many things that are unknown about this motor and about both of these motors now. And I'm hoping, I mean, if worse comes to worse, I just have to take it apart, rebuild it, put it back together, and then I can run it. And I might look at doing that. That's why I kind of want to take it apart and check the bearings and stuff, because it's going to be a little bit of time before Mahovitz gets the adapter done anyway. So I might take that time just to make sure that the 2.2 is all sound and ready to go. And then we can get it ready for, the other things. Because when we do the cams and stuff, it's going to need springs, obviously, and maybe we can do that kind of stuff ahead of time, but we'll see. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow. And if you haven't, make sure to take a look at the video that's already up on exhaust manifold and header testing. Thank you, TRD. I contacted a barrel intercooler manufacturer in Australia. I wanted a comparison between theirs and eBay copy. They said they perform the same. I bought one. Should I send it to West Tech? Send me a picture of it. Send it to my email. I already listed my email in here. Please let me know, and I'll check it out.